do that every time before the meeting, and it won't pop up until she lets you in. Everybody here that's gonna be here? Are you all ready? Now it is. All right, call to order. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting, May 18th, 2021, 4 o'clock. All right, let me, I guess we reviewed that. Roll call.
Board Member Bishop.
Present.
Board Member Cook is absent. Board Member DeLauro.
Present.
Board Member Jones has resigned, so Board Member Robinson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Brittingham.
Here.
Chairman Simulescu.
Here. Do I have to check anything as we go through this, or do you do that?
You don't have to check anything.
Okay, so I just let you do it. I'll just go down the list then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, order of business. Consent items. To help streamline meetings and allow the focus to be on other items requiring strategic thought, the consent items portion of the agenda groups the routine, procedural, self-explanatory, non-controversial items together. These items are voted on in a single motion, one vote. However, any council members requesting further information on a specific item thus removes it from the consent items section for individual attention and separate vote. So that's the consent, what that means, and that we're talking about consider approval of the regular minutes of February 23rd, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Anything else? Go ahead, let's take the roll.
Okay, so you'll want to vote through your system. But everybody but Mike.
He broke it.
I don't know, I missed the verbal voting as well.
What's hard? We click here. Does it give you the results up on the screen after you?
Yeah, as
Okay.
soon as everybody puts their vote in.
Okay, cool. We'll see it up here in a sec. Up there, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Motion passed. There is no items, we're not considering any items removed from consent, so we can move on to that, move on from there. Number 3 on the list is information items, Parks Department report. Who's up? What do you got for us?
A little bit of a report, I guess.
Okay.
What's been going on? I got some sheets I can pass out. I'm gonna be one short, but all right. So there's quite a bit here. I'm kind of just gonna go through these and talk about some of the things that have happened since we last met in February. Shortly after we met, we ended up having some freeze problems we had to fix at the complex, so we're working on all the locker rooms, soccer restrooms, our office, so there was a lot of repairs that need to be done there. We've since added benches to all the soccer fields, the football fields, and we've been getting tournaments. We're still waiting on the arrival of 4 scoreboards, so we're still working with that company, but there's been some problems we ran into, whether it be too wet or just their lead times, they're kind of backed up as well. So just as part of getting the fields ready and re-fertilizing them, putting mulch in the playgrounds, just getting the complex ready for all the tournaments that are going to be happening. Those are some of the things we've been doing. For the concession stands, I know we talked several times about having to get those ready to meet health codes. So we've installed windows in there. We're looking at the possibility of doing some bigger windows. So once those are done, we'll be able to pass health code and be able to serve hot food, which will help with our tournament revenues, things like that. We looked at a couple different estimates. I think last time we got an estimate to do all the field lights out there to figure out what it would cost to replace them with LEDs. I gave you that number. This time we've looked at what it would cost to do kind of some preliminary costs and general estimates on what it would cost the turf, the softball or baseball fields, because as I'll kind of explain later, the majority of our time at the complex, we're spending a lot of manpower marking those fields, and that takes up most of what the complex workers are doing. So it was just something we wanted to consider and look at. Since then, we've hired 2 new workers at the sports complex. For a while there, only had 3 workers there, so that's good. We got some new people working. For Carl Albert, you've probably been able to see this, but there's been major changes there. We got the playgrounds up, we got the awnings up, the turf in. We were able to put in the basketball and soccer goals, redo the parking lot, redo the surrounding area lighting. So a lot of that project is being done. There's still some minor things that need to be accomplished there. We want to put in some smaller playground equipment, some benches to sit on, and some other minor things. But that project has come along pretty well, and it's pretty much wrapped up. And we're just looking to do some finish work. We did hold an Easter event, which was put on by our marketing coordinator. We do have another event coming up, which is a city pool day, which is for city employees. So we're going to be trying to do more events in the future, especially those tailored towards the public, but we're trying to get some of those out for now. The pool, so we've been working on the pool, cleaning it out, getting it ready. That pool will be ready to open May 29th. We brought Andrea Boyd back as our swimming pool manager, and I have done roughly 35 or 40 interviews for all of our lifeguards and things like that. We're going to put a handicap pool lift in, and that'll be ready by the first day. Some other things we're doing around the park, so a lot of the benches in the parks, picnic tables in the parks like Carl Albert, Rocket Park, some of those are just very old. So those are being replaced. I ordered 20 new benches, and those have just came in. We're putting those together now. We finished up some brush hogging contracts, and those have been started. And then kind of the big thing we were working on, which goes along with our master parks plan, is we started working on a 5-year capital improvement plan, and we had 3 projects that were approved that we sent in to be for the next fiscal year. And those are adding lighting around Rocket Park, so similar to how Carl Albert has done, replacing the fence and lighting at Billy Miller 3 that's been down for several years, and that would include the scoreboard. And then we got a new finished mower for Lake Durant, which we need because it's difficult to mow out there with a zero-turn mower. So that's the basics of it, kind of running through. We also hired some additional seasonal workers, so just trying to get caught up. That's been the most difficult thing, is just working with the amount of workers we had, so those have been important.
Okay.
Any questions?
I just want to say I'm glad to hear that we're getting more benches and picnic tables out there. That's one of the things that I think, and particularly, I drive by Carl Albert now 3 times a day probably. So much activity out there, and I want to really commend everybody in this group and city council and everybody, because that is incredible, what has happened in that area in terms of just the enhancement of it and now the use of it. But I was glad to hear that there were more benches and picnic tables. Is there anything in regards to the new courts that we put there, particularly the one that we just added with the shorter goals? I don't know what we call that. Is there anything? I've noticed some skateboards and bicycles on that court. Do we want that And if we don't, we probably need some signage saying so.
Yeah, that's definitely not the purpose of that. So we did get some signs out there for like no dunking and on those. It was designed to be for more of a youth area, so we don't want those to get torn down. And then we got some signs up for the turf for like no food and drink because it would cause ants and things in the turf. So that could be some additional signage we could get.
Yeah, and I mean, these were younger kids, they weren't, but I was wondering, I didn't think that probably is what we want in terms
No.
of bicycles and skateboards, et cetera.
I'm
on that
guessing they
surface.
probably ventured over from the skate pad. So
Yeah.
yeah,
They
that would be
did.
some signage we could get up.
But, anyway, but probably need to look at some signage saying so, but really a nice, addition to our city, and that park has made a dramatic jump and leap. So thanks to everybody for doing that.
With the, on information, on the estimates received for the turfing of the facilities, is that information that is going to be shared with us at a later date? Are there preliminary estimates on what that looks like?
It was a very general number. So we looked at two different things. We looked at just doing the infield from the catcher's area out to the grass. And I want to say that was around like the low 40s, like 41, somewhere in there per field. And then we looked at doing all the way to the dugouts. And that number, I can't remember, but it was probably about, I think like 60,000, somewhere in there, if you go all the way to the dugouts. We were just trying to get a general number of what it would cost. And maybe for some long-term planning, look at maybe turfing those fields.
Is that per field or is that total?
That's per field.
Okay.
On the park benches that you're installing, what type of material are they? What do they look like? How are we going to secure them to that pavilion somehow? What's it looking like?
They have a metal base and then like the plastic, like poly top. And it's got like a hexagon type top. I don't know the exact word off the top of my head, but they can be bolted down, yes. They're not like wood benches like are out there. That was one thing that those just kind of degrade over time, so make sure to get like a metal and a plastic that wouldn't break down. A treated plastic.
Did y'all decide on the lighting or if you're doing anything with the lighting
What,
over there? Because remember we all said we had a bunch of lights that were out and stuff like that at the complex. Did y'all decide anything about if you're going to replace the lighting or what you're going to do?
no, the numbers that came back were too high, so
Right.
we would have to go back and get a secondary proposal for like at the time we got that done for like a college level to see what it would cost, so we could go back and do a lower level.
Was there a cost estimate on hiring out another company, a third-party company to replace the lights? I remember that was one of the issues, was that the city does not have the equipment to get up there. We'd have to use fire trucks or something to that effect.
Not at this time. I have not looked into that at this time, no.
On the estimates for the cost to turf those fields, is that an expense that would come from the park's budget?
That would probably have to be a capital improvement plan that we would need to look at, but it would definitely need to have some long-term planning to that effect. We would not have the money in an operating budget to do it.
Doesn't the sports complex have its own taxes dedicated to it? Wouldn't it come out of that budget, not out of the capital improvements budget?
DCUA money, or DCUA, okay, too many acronyms. The quarter cent sales tax that was originally allocated for the complex, we can approach the Durant Facilities Authority anytime we have a need. That's the reason we brought the LED lighting upgrade to them. We could also bring the fact at some point in time about the turf fields. The other reason about doing the turf is because if you get even a small rain and you have a tournament, you lose you lose that tournament for that day. Whereas with turf, you would, you could still play it, so. But at $40 to $50, $60,000 a field, depending on how many square feet we end up putting down on that. We would like to do initially, where we have the most activity would be on the softball fields. That's just the number of kids that are playing. That is the most used part of the park. So we would want to do those first and then move over to the baseball areas and do them second. But it'd be a significant amount of money to do that. So we thought we just recently added turf under the playgrounds at Carl Albert, and we knew how much that was going to cost us. So we thought now's the perfect time to find out. Let's see what it's going to cost us. So when we get into long-range planning, we'll at least have a rough dollar estimate on what that's going to take. So, and that is with it being laid. That's not our people doing it. That's a contractor coming in and doing it professionally.
What was the total number of fields?
8.
8.
8, yes, sir. If you do the football field, it's 9. If you do the soccer fields, you're up to 12. And that's just at the complex alone.
I mean, the soccer fields, we played soccer this year. I don't know, they weren't as well maintained this year as they were in previous years. I felt like there was really no green grass till a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, obviously we need to do something different, but at least it sounds like the turf is more important for softball and baseball, really, because soccer is usually played on grass anyway, so. But, okay.
On the grass issue, following that freeze, I know on the front of our city hall here, we lost some of our grass due to the fact that we were sub-zero for quite a while. And then when we also spray it, that does retard it
Right.
a little while until you get some warm weather to bring it back. So.
On the sports complex, and I think maybe Mike DeLaura may be able to speak to this more, some feedback we're getting from people attending the sports complex and using it. They're saying, we're having discussions with people in the community and people using it. They're saying that for them, the lighting hasn't been so much an issue as the restrooms. The restroom facilities for the users has been less than desirable and sometimes not even functional for them to use. And so I don't know if we've had that discussion with people before, if there's awareness that the restrooms are in not desirable condition by users, and is that something we can look at making an adjustment to?
Yes, that was part of the freeze again. So we tried to handle it in-house several times, and we ultimately ended up having to hire a local place to come in, and we knocked out the walls and had to go in and replace all the pipes in the walls in a lot of those bathrooms, and we were still experiencing leaks. So they had to come several times, and we were running into issues, and it was all related to that freeze. Those bathrooms aren't heated, so when we had that freeze, all the pipes froze up and bust, and then there was leaks and all kinds of stuff in those bathrooms. They've since been fixed. We've temporarily patched the walls, and then we'll have to go back in later and replace the concrete.
I think that comment, though, about the restrooms, if you correct me if I'm wrong, this may be something that's even been going back for a longer time period than just this year. It's been over a several-year period when we were visiting with people and asking them to compare other regional locations to our region. How can we improve our place? How can we be more desirable? If you could grade us, how would you grade us compared to other places in our region? And the bathrooms came back as a reason why they would probably put us in one of the lower tier locations to want to use.
There's a cleanliness thing?
It's like I'm not sure exactly, other than they said that you open the door and the smell just knocks you back.
So maybe it's a cleanliness thing, I don't know. So it sounds like it, but.
Yeah, the direct comments were specific to just, I know we're talking about restrooms here, so of course there's going to be some odors, but clearly I think it was so much, the comments directly were just that they're consistently like that. Now, again, sometimes I think people exaggerate their comments in a negative fashion, but I know the times that I've been in there, I know that it is different, because summer versus winter, you're gonna get some differences there, but certainly I think that's something that, you know, in time, I'm sure that can be addressed in terms of, you know, wanting to create a more inviting experience for people coming out of town, and so much so that they want to return. I think that's probably the most important part, regardless of sport, is making sure that they want to, you know, they had a good experience regardless of whether their son or daughter won or lost on the field.
Yeah, I unfortunately can't speak for previous years, but I will say, we've definitely ran into some issues, like even while I've been here, like we have to put porta potties out sometimes if we have pipes, you know, bust and things like that. So there's definitely some things that come up. And the other thing too, and like I hate to blame it, but we definitely want to still hire those weekend people so that we can have people cleaning those restrooms, because otherwise I'm out there cleaning them while trying to attend the tournaments. So there's just kind of general multitude of factors, but it's definitely something we can look at fixing.
Have we had an increase in tournaments this year, you think, from obviously last year is not a good example, but previous years? Because I know that was one of y'all's goals, was to increase the amount of tournaments that we've had.
I mean, that I know of, there's not any data of how many tournaments there was. So I would say so far this year we've been a little bit below where I would want to be, for sure. So we did have a couple tournaments. Some of them were canceled due to weather, and that kind of goes back to the turf thing. But I'd say we're below where we want to be for tournaments, for sure.
Is there an ideal timeline that, I know we're looking at new lighting, updated lighting out there, turf potential. Is there a timeline on that specific project?
Not at this time. Those are, the lighting itself is nearly the cost of the entire park's budget. So that's going to be a several year thing. There'd be a lot of money there. The turf is, again, probably, it could be put in a 5-year plan, but there's no guarantee. It may be 10 years.
Are we pretty well? I know we've done a lot of grants in all these projects and everything. Is that our only choice in terms of any major improvements and major projects, or in terms of finding funding? I'm asking about what our choices are when we do want to do one of these things. What are our funding choices, or is that pretty limited?
Go back. I'll let James, he's more familiar with some of these budgets.
The city can appropriate money for capital improvements. That's one way of doing it. The Durant Facilities Authority, from the tax revenue they come in, they can make improvements to our facilities from that money as well. Grants, you can use grants. As you're familiar, the grant that we just did at Carl Albert Park, that grant was a 50-50 grant as it started out, and as it ended up, we're going to be probably paying 80% in the grant, probably 20%, because of budget overruns and the fact that there was more to be done to do it right than originally was done in the planning stage. And that's an issue, is that from what I understood, that improvement to Carl Albert Park, where we did the 2 playgrounds, the multi-sport court in the middle, was done on the back of a napkin. So therefore, your estimates, your cost estimates, and your planning really wasn't a good component to actually what it cost us to do that. And again, thanks to the city for funding and doing it right, and it is done right. The lighting is good, the turf is good, the equipment is good. So I think that our focus now, I think my focus, and I think John Dean, the city's, is let's do it right the first time rather than go back in here a half a dozen times and just nickel and dime the thing, you know. But that primarily identifies your sources. The only other source, and we have used this in the past, especially on the splash pad, is private donations from donors. And I know many of you remember Ron Cross, and Ron was donated, his estate donated money, and Tammy and them donated money for that splash pad that's over behind George Washington, the old George Washington. It's still George Washington to me, but over there. So those are primarily the funding revenue sources that we can go out and touch. It does help that we have our own grant writer to do that. And again, it just kind of depends on, and I know as we looked at our 5-year capital improvement plan this year for the city, we were behind infrastructure-wise, streets, as everybody knows, water, sewer, parks, everything is behind. We're in a catch-up mode. So unfortunately, we can't get everything we want, and we just kind of had to pick some priorities this year. So safety, we want to be safe. We want it to be ADA compliant. We want to get the restrooms where they are nice. We want to get those restrooms where they're also completely ADA compliant and they're heated, so that we don't have to put a porta potty out in front of a nice restroom in the wintertime. But these are, you know, again, it's going to take us a while to get to all of it. So that's our goal, though.
Where does the authority get, the Durant Recreation Authority, is that,
Yeah,
where do they get their,
Durant's
where does their funding come from?
quarter-cent sales tax that was passed
Okay, and that's, yeah, I remember.
many years back,
Right.
14 years ago, I think,
Right.
Brother James,
Yeah, something,
if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
And
And
that's
that-
up for revote in a couple of years, right? Because they're done paying that note off for the,
2024.
so we're almost done. So that'll need to,
I
so that
believe
could be
it's
some extra money in the
2024.
But
future
they,
if we
do
get it
they have
reapproved.
more purview than just the multi-sports complex?
They do. It's Durant facilities.
Okay, so that would cover
Right.
everything.
Yes, sir. It is facilities.
I noticed that there was a bullet point here, submitted a 5-year capital improvement plan. Is that a separate plan from the city's plan?
City manager and finance, they started this year for the first time in a good while for us to do by department a 5-year capital improvement plan where that department head looks at his needs, gets a rough estimate of those needs and puts it on a document. And that way, like when it goes to council, for instance, it's not a surprise that 5 years from now, 4 years from now, we want to do a major improvement. You know, it gives everybody, it kind of serves everybody notice that we're going to need to spend some money down the road here, some big money, you know. And it helps us better prepare for that. And all departments did that, by the way, citywide this year. Just helps us prepare our budget process a lot better.
Is the park's 5-year capital improvement plan a document that will be shared with the board?
It will be. Mhm.
Is there a particular date or timeline on that?
What we're trying to do is to get a rough draft of a parks master plan ready by sometime summertime. And that way we have a starting point that we can start to look at each one of the parks individually and say, hey, this is what we need. Unfortunately, some of the capital improvement projects, just like this year, we needed to finish more than anything else, like out at Lake Durant, because the time he gets through mowing with a zero turn, he's already behind, and it's grown up again, whereas a wide scope to finish more can cover the same, 3 times the same area that a zero turn can cover and still give a finish more look to it, you know, not a brush hog. So,
Is there a timeline on the 3 bullet points on adding the lighting around Rocket Park and Billy Miller 3? and that finish mower? Is there a particular timeline other than just fiscal year end 21?
Our budget starts July 1.
Okay.
We'll get the mower pretty quick because we're right in the middle of that. Due to the fact that we have limited parks personnel and the park personnel are doing the mowing, any maintenance or anything other than just necessary maintenance or rebuilds usually happens in the winter months. That's how come we did Carl Albert Park when we did it, actually, because we could take those personnel and concentrate them out on Carl Albert Park, and they don't have to be mowing, you know. Right now, we are struggling with all the rain and everything this time of year, massive amount of growth. So we're struggling to keep up just with mowing. Matter of fact, we had to contract out mowing on the city hall, the library, and at our senior center. We just don't have enough people to keep it mowed. We have 4 people.
Are they still contracting out the right-of-ways and all that?
We are.
Yep.
We are. We were doing some of the right-of-ways, but that's not where we want our people to be. We want our people to be in the parks. We don't want them out on the highway. They don't have the right equipment for that, and if they're out there doing that, they're not in the park.
I need some IT help over here in a minute.
Any other questions about this? Oh, swimming pool. When's that opening? And
Swimming pool?
yeah,
May 29th.
May 29th. Are we doing parties this year at the swimming pool?
We are. We already have several scheduled.
Great. I think swim lessons also, so that's good. No, I was just checking because last year was kind of, with COVID, everything was kind of messed up, so that's good. Any other questions?
I had a couple of questions that we had sent in and that weren't completely addressed. So the first one was, so this is May, this is the time frame to be preparing our budgets and submitting it to council for approval. Are we going to be able to see what was involved in the parks budget, what's going to be improved for this next year?
Yeah.
Is that something the board's allowed to work with?
I have the copies of our budget here. I can show you.
Was this already voted and approved on, I guess, at an earlier time? No, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm more familiar with how other towns like Calera, for example, works to where their boards all actively work on the budget together. So being in this board, this was just different to see what the process is that we're allowed to work on if we get to have input in what we want to see the direction going or not. And so that hadn't been expressed to us, and so I didn't know if we had the ability to say we would like to include things or,
I think John he's gonna. There's your.
Calera and the city of Durant are quite different entities,
Sure.
right? Different form of government. So the city manager is responsible for preparing a budget. If you look in the code, it specifically outlines what this board's goals are, and it's short-term and long-range planning, not a annual budget. Okay, so that's y'all's primary focus.
Okay. So we're going to be involved with the 5-year plan?
That is
Long-range
one of your
planning?
tasks. Yes, sir. Short-term and long-term planning.
Okay.
So, and y'all do that on your own. It doesn't include staff. They don't need to be here for that. That's what you guys are for. Figure out a plan. And then you advise the city manager and city council on that plan.
Okay.
So,
You can always ask for stuff, but it has to be approved by the city council. If we decide,
Correct.
hey, we advise this, but they have
That's
to
correct.
find the way to pay for it and all that, so.
yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I did have a couple, but I haven't looked at this yet, so I want to see.
Okay.
What are some of the highlights in the budget that are projects we're looking to work on this next year while I'm scanning through and trying to interpret what
So-
our
Sure.
summary level numbers are?
I mean, that first page, all you're looking at is just like salaries and everyday, maintenance and things like that. The only really thing you're gonna see that, in terms of like long-term project, you're gonna see on that third page, the capital improvement projects that we submitted for, which is the Dixon Park improvement, which is $50,000 for the lighting there, to get lighting up there. We're hoping it'll have a similar effect to Carl Albert. That park is our second most used park. So we want to get some lighting up there, and then we can start looking at maybe replacing some playground equipment, things like that, redoing pavilions, those type of things. The Billy Miller Park improvement, so that's my understanding that we need to replace the fence there, need to replace the lighting, scoreboard. That's what that money is for. And then that $17,000 is that finished mower at Lake Durant.
Okay.
So those are the three main.
So we don't have in the current budget, in the parks budget, to replace or improve any existing playground equipments. We don't have the funding for it. So if a slide breaks,
No, that money's in there. So
Oh, there is, under, it sounds like there is some.
if you go back to the first page, there'll be a thing there, $30,000 for playground equipment,
okay.
and that's typically to replace equipment or buy new equipment.
Okay.
And again, like, the money's not unlimited, so, you know, have to request and then
Sure.
be approved.
I did notice on this third page, and I don't know if you're the person to comment on this or not, but I did submit a question wanting to get an update on the Rails to Trails project. And I didn't
Yeah.
know what the status of this was. Do we have any, are we able to show anything for the money that we've spent?
I can tell you what James told me, but again, I haven't been here that long, so this project was before me, but based on what James said, he says the project is not a dead project, but we're looking at alternative options. Basically, the project will need more insight and planning. The land that was picked for that project is mostly southeastern land and not city land. And if you have any other questions, you'll probably have to ask James, but
If
I'm
he-
not as familiar with that project. I haven't.
If he could address it and just give us a clarification. I know there was a listing of donors, and they've been communicating with us and asking us for updates, and they're wanting to know, are they going to get their money back? Is the project going to happen? How's this going to work? Do they want to, they kind of feel like they're being disenfranchised from continuing to support future projects
Right.
just because they don't know what's going on with this?
Sure. James, you want to talk about the rails and trails?
On Rails to Trails, that's not a dead project. What we discovered is all the land that sits on is university land, it's not city land. The last estimate that we got for the bridge going over Chuckwaw Creek was $800,000. That's not good use of $800,000. If we're gonna build a bridge for $800,000, it's gonna be over someplace where people are traveling a lot in their cars. City Manager Dean and I spoke about it, and the goal is to kind of get back together with DTOS and say, hey, let's not let it die, but let's regroup and see if we can figure out another way to get the trail system implemented and to make it happen. Whether it be the university through them, we don't know yet because it's still in, we just got a lot of this stuff recently. Now, if you guys remember when they redid the Chuckwaw Creek Bridge on First Street, I asked ODOT to make pedestrian crossways protected on that bridge, and they declined to do that, and we got the bare minimum. Okay? Had they done that, we would have relieved the problem.
Sure.
We would have rerouted the trail. I want to make another run at that at some point in time because of the safety factor. Southeastern's softball field, those apartments, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic in an unlighted 2-lane bridge with no protected walkways. I
On a
think
major
that's a
highway.
hazard
On a major highway, correct?
on a major highway.
Are there remaining funds from, that DTOS provided, are there still remaining funds in that budget that have not been spent?
I do not know that. I would, Becca, our grants coordinator,
Yes.
Becca has the breakdown on all those money, and it's accounted for. And I would have to ask her. I know there's been money spent on engineering, quite a bit of money spent on engineering. But
Have the engineers provided any product?
an
for the-
$800,000 plan for a bridge.
Okay. Is that something that, I guess the conversation that I'm trying to have here, the end
Mhm.
goal is the supporters that provided funding from the community wanting to try to salvage this to where they don't feel disenfranchised from continuing to support other things.
I just got it. I can't do any more than what I'm doing with it right now. And as we go forward, I don't want it to die. I do want it to move forward. I think it's a good project. As far as,
Is there something that the community can do to support you with communicating to ODOT? We would like to have protected crossing there at Chuckwall.
yes, that would help. And I think talking with our senator and our representative as well would be good. I think, and I don't blame our local ODOT people. I know Mike, the E. Kellys and people like that. Anthony, Mike was his uncle, but anyway, Anthony Kelly, they're very responsive to us locally, but they are working within a hierarchy within state government. The legislature appropriates ODOT's funding, and if it is on a short list, it's usually an 8-year plan. Okay, and then they go on out from there multiple years out. So what I have seen is when there is political pressure from a senator or representative, they get a little more attention than normal, since they do control their budget.
Okay.
Okay.
That's helpful. That's helpful.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I think that, as you guys know, and this off topic slightly, but as you guys know, that road is just getting ready to get busier and busier and busier. Okay. With the implementation of the elementary school out off of Gerlach, with the university adding facilities, that is just going to get to be a busier road. And that is a major thoroughfare coming into town. So,
Isn't the city at some point supposed to assume control of that street that's now under state control? 'Cause I remember we talked about that at the.
they want us to take it
When
because
we
then
did
they
the-
don't have to maintain it.
Right, when we talked about it, when we did the remember the infrastructure committee or
Mhm.
whatever, I remember that was one of the things was that first street is eventually the state wants to give it back or whatever.
Exactly, so they don't have to maintain it. That is exactly right. That's just like what we got with Main Street. From where the bypass goes around, that is now ours to
Right.
maintain.
I thought that was, I didn't
Yes,
remember
sir.
if it was.
They
I
would
think-
love to give it to us.
Right, you thought, they said like, if we maybe improve it first before you give it back.
We don't want it.
But you don't want it, I obviously
We do
makes
not
sense.
want it, and here's why. As long as that is a hazmat route, as long as it's a truck route, we don't want it back.
Right.
We don't want to have to be doing that. We cannot, you see what condition our streets are in. It's going to take us years to overcome that. And as heavily traveled as that one is and all that it needs, that needs to be an improved
Right.
2-lane, really should have been a 4-lane
Right.
coming into town.
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay?
correct, yes.
It should be.
It needs to be.
And if we take it, it'll just stretch our budget even tighter than it already is.
A good
You know.
example of why we don't is just the few blocks that we're gonna be repairing on Main Street. And it's gonna be multi-million
Right.
dollars for just a few blocks.
That's a good point, because First Street would be the same way. It would have drainage issues as well that have to be addressed, widening issues, and just like Steve has said, you know, we're going from 9th to 15th, and it is a multi-million-dollar project.
I wasn't advocating for it, but I remember that was a discussion. I didn't know.
They'd they would love to give it to us.
Can they just give it to you, or do you have to say we want it? I mean, how does that work? How do they decide what gets given back or taken back or whatever?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think while it remains a state highway, their obligation is that they have to maintain it,
Sure.
okay?
All right.
And it does remain a state highway.
Sure.
Okay, that is State Road 78
Right.
and 48, and then 78, so. And it goes right through our town. I mean, you know, it comes to Main Street and goes to Southeast Third and then goes south, you know. They need to be, I'm not an ODOT fan, but they need, unfortunately with ODOT funding, a lot of times that money goes more into your metro areas than it does come down into the rural areas. So to answer your question 10 minutes ago, it would help anytime that we can speak to the people that appropriate the money.
Okay, absolutely. That's
Okay?
all right. That's helpful. I do have two more questions. I guess one comment's going to be maybe for Caleb, but I had a person who was at the Dixon Durant Park. They were playing on the Rocket, and they did notice that it looked like there was some metal fatigue in places. Is that going to be the Rocket being addressed this next year for some cleanup, some improvements?
We had talked about it. That park, that Rocket is a kind of a fixture there. It's going to be expensive to rehab it, but we think it should probably be taken down, see what it's going to cost to rehab it, and then maybe put it back up if we can afford to do that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to ask some more questions about Carl Albert Park. I know we've got a lot out there, and it's becoming just a fantastic park, and people are just using it like they've never used before. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes.
Do we have a listing in the short term of what we're looking to, additional things we're wanting to put out there?
We'll
locations
cover
and-
that when we get into the master plan,
Okay.
and that'll give you guys a chance to have input in that as well. But we do want to look, we've got to do parking next, I think, and bathrooms.
Okay.
Those are the next two things, I think, because we've got to have the ADA accessibility on both of those, number one. And right now, as you know, when you go out there, when it is busy, there's not a lot of excess parking left,
Yeah.
you know? So,
We've had some other communications with the disc golf group out there at Carl Albert, and they're wanting to, they really enjoy that park, and we're getting a lot of feedback from people outside the community coming in specifically for this course. And they really enjoy Lake Durant as well. Lake Durant is harder to keep maintained mowing, and so Carl Albert's kind of becoming our main, still main course. They're wanting to look at designing the course slightly differently, looking to add in some more courses and do some placements around. And so that's why they wanted to ask us, are there intentions in the short term of adding in a dog park or something they need to be looking to move around to help them to where they're more accessible for what you're planning to do and still being accommodating?
two things that were mentioned to me was some sort of dog area. The other thing that was mentioned was the pickleball, some pickleball
Okay.
courts. But again, we're trying to identify right now, we're trying to get all the parks into a format that we can start looking at and to see what space is available and what would be utilized where parking is available and what we need to do with parking in the future. There's some discussion about taking Brookside and not making that a through thoroughfare anymore for safety's sakes as well. But again, those are just ideas that we're throwing out at this point in time.
Excellent.
We're way behind. So,
That's it. That's all the questions I think I've got. I know it's just a one or two, so if anybody else has got a question.
Okay. Any other questions about this?
You know,
I mean, I do have a question or comment. I don't know if we need to move ahead to new business, but,
There is none,
okay. Okay, well,
but if we
Yeah.
have some, I'll ask. Wait, go ahead, ask your questions.
okay. During the last Parks meeting, I know we had discussed some concerns from the disc golf group, and of course, I know we had that discussion about, you know, other projects taking priority, which is kind of the report we gave back to the group. Certainly, there's quite a bit ahead of us as far as mowing and the infrastructure that's needed. The question that I guess we're, you know, asked from that group for us to kind of express is that if that was something that would be able to be worked into as far as the donation from the club to the city for the concrete to be done this winter when there is more time available. And so that was the question posed. And if so, is that something that, I guess, how would they communicate those specific? I guess the assumption was that it was going to be just like Lake Durant concrete was done.
let me back up on that just a minute. Now, my understanding was the way the pads are poured there now, those were poured by the club?
Well, yes.
Is that my understanding?
That's correct. So
Okay,
that was
okay.
done back before,
2016.
it was 2016 when
Okay.
the exact dimensions were not official by the PDGA, which is the standardized
Gotcha, okay.
entity.
I wondered why they were different,
Sure.
didn't know, so,
So then I think that is exactly why they feel compelled to say, hey, this is a mistake from the club's perspective.
now would
We
that
wanna-
be, Mike, would it be a donation for materials and labor or just the material only?
The thought process up to this point was materials.
Okay,
But if that's certainly, the labor element is needed to be added in, that's certainly something I can visit again
well,
with.
what I was saying, we might, if it were a labor and materials item, we might get a private contractor that could get to it before we could get to it.
Okay,
Okay, that was my reason for asking it in that manner.
okay,
Okay. Because sometimes private contractors can be between jobs and
right.
they could go do 3 or 4 or whatever, you know, and
How would the club communicate that the city would approve that contractor? So if the club approaches a contractor, the contractor says, okay, I can do this for you, do we need to contact you or?
yes.
Caleb,
Yeah,
you
and they'd
you
need
give
to
your
be,
approval.
they'd need to be, have a business license with the city of Durant,
Okay,
which, that way we know who they are and that they're, you know, fairly reputable. And then the design process that you want them to be to meet your guidelines would have to be pretty clear, and they'd have to know that they were doing that to that standard. And I would think, we'll have to talk with our city attorney, but I'd almost think we'd have to have a waiver from them or workers' comp on them so that city's not going to be liable for injuries that occur what they're doing, you know.
One other thought was if the club wanted to volunteer that labor as was done previously in 2016, is that an option that could be pursued?
It is, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that something that I just have to have them contact you and Caleb and set that up?
I'd prefer you go through Caleb on that,
Sure.
please. Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason why is we're trying to keep it that our department heads are in the loop on everything, you know, and then
Right.
not get out of that, yeah.
Is there a preferred time of year for me to let them know, hey, this is when the city would prefer to be approached with that?
What we have seen, again, is the summer months are going to be obviously the busiest months out there. We see cold weather, we see the activity, even though there's still activity, it's not quite as great.
Right.
That's what we've noticed when we've been out there working. You know, I mean, if it's a pretty warm day, I mean, there's people all over the park,
Okay,
you know.
sure,
And I think that'd be the best time probably to do it.
okay. I'll
I know, you
report that
know,
back.
and what made me think about that was, many of you may know James Young, and this isn't a solicitation for James, but I know he does smaller jobs, and there are others that we've used before that can do smaller jobs. And like I say, they may have a big job that they're having to wait, and they'll fit something in between, you know, and we've experienced that before, so,
Okay.
okay?
Do you guys have a list of people that you guys use or approve to be used for that project, potentially, like independent contractors that y'all like recommend or use, that you can give them a list so that they don't ask somebody that might not be on the list?
We have started, what we want to make sure is that they have a City of Durant business license. Okay, and that list is available.
Okay, perfect, yeah. So you
Mhm.
guys can definitely look that up.
Is that a list I could get with Caleb on? Is that,
Yes,
okay.
and he can get it from our finance people.
And just again, I apologize for maybe the repeat question, but just for clarification purposes, you did mention that there would be some additional approvals that would be needed if the club so wanted to pursue that from a labor perspective.
Yeah, we could probably waive the permitting, but we want to make sure and go through the proper channels that we permit it
Okay,
for construction.
okay.
Okay?
Any other questions? All right, let's move on. Number 4, administration. I'm not sure what that means.
We don't have anything under that category, so
Okay. And new business. Is there any new business? There's none listed, but if anybody has any new business, speak now. All right. No new business. Perfect. All right. Based on the fact that we've gone through the whole agenda, we've asked all our questions, and there is no new business, I move to adjourn.
I believe we have maybe
Nope.
some open comments.
Oh, come up here. Sorry about that. I didn't know you were petitions from the audience. Go ahead, sir.
You said new business, I don't know if that qualifies.
That's fine.
All right, hey, my name's Brad Dollar, some of you know me, some of you don't. I've worked with Mike, my son actually played lacrosse with him for a while. I've been involved specifically in baseball in Durant for quite a while. I've been working with Caleb, trying to get more tournaments to the area. When I'm not here, let me back up, previously on the Durant baseball board for the last 2.5 years. I'll just speak plainly, I wasn't happy with the way things are going, so I left. I'm now running the league in Toca. I say all that to say, every weekend I'm in a ballpark somewhere. Melissa, Texas, Plano, Frisco, Euless, Denison this last weekend. We played in Sherman, here, Toca, Ardmore, Broken Bow. I kind of travel all over and look at these different facilities. And I'm actually in a position where 2 years ago, after the incidents that you all are probably familiar with our baseball league, the baseball tournaments in Durant stopped, and for good reason. And the city, in my opinion, and when I say the city, I don't mean the city government, but the city kind of got a black eye when it comes to youth sports. I'm finding it is increasingly difficult to get teams from the Metroplex or even from Oklahoma City, even as close as Ardmore, to come and play in tournaments here. I am encouraged at some of the things that I heard about the plan for turf and the lighting and things like that. Those are things that all need to be done if the city wants to be competitive in bringing in more of those types of events. I myself, I run events, and I've got some scheduled here. I'm guilty. Some of mine have not made this year. I had one this coming weekend, the Pride of Four Memorial, and some of you may have seen the advertisement for it. That particular event, and I bring it up for one reason, has more traffic on Facebook than any event I've ever hosted. I just knew that we were going to be bursting at the seams. I had 6 teams registered. Now, some of that may be me. I'm not naive. I'm new. Our sanctioning body's new to some people, but I just had 34 teams in Denison last weekend. 2 weeks before that, I had 25. Could have had 45. We have the ability to bring teams here if we make some changes to our facilities into the way that we're doing business in Durant. I personally don't like traveling to Broken Bow to host a tournament. You know, I work in Ardmore, so Ardmore's not that far, but I can almost see the lights from the complex, from my house. I would much rather be hosting here. The turf, for me, is huge, but the first and I'll say most affordable, but, you know, we had the conversations last year, it was a little more expensive than what I thought it would be. But the first thing we need to do at the complex, in my opinion, is put shade over all the bleachers. People do not want to come and sit in the sun all day. Tournaments run from 8 in the morning till 10:30 at night. And if you're one of those teams, especially on the second day in bracket play where you start early because you're at the bottom and you're good enough to make it through, those people are sitting in the sun all day. They don't want to do it. The condition of the fields, I will say, has improved over the last couple of years. I have seen that. I was actually at the park last night and talked with Caleb, and I was looking at the grass, and what JD said is absolutely right. The freeze did a number on all the facilities around here. I started hosting in Durant and Toca about the same time, and if you guys have ever been to the Toca complex, that grass is phenomenal, and they're struggling with their grass this year. So the weather was a big piece of that, but the overall conditions have improved. I've seen it, but we've got to get the word out. I think we've got to do more to bring outside people to the area. I coach a team out of Denison, and I've got James Dry's son plays for me. You know, him being involved at Choctaw, we've had lots of discussions about how we can get more people to come. Of course, they want to fill the hotel. We want to fill our local hotels and restaurants. And the longer I do this, the more of those conversations I have and the more experience I get in how those events benefit cities. And so when I approach cities, I kind of use that as a bargaining chip. Like, hey, I can bring, 40, 50 teams to this event. 25 are going to be from out of town, And so I try to leverage that information, and the more of that I gain, the more I see the benefit for the cities to have these events. Durant, and I'll use James' words. Durant should be the mecca for youth sports in this area, and it's not. I can get 25 to 30 teams in Toca, Oklahoma. Nobody wants to go to Toca, Oklahoma. It's not a knock on Toca, but nobody knows anything about it. But when they come and they play in that facility, they continue to come back. And I'm talking teams from Arlington. There's no reason we should not be able to do that here with a few minor changes. And so I've been pretty frustrated. I speak candidly. I probably get under some people's skin sometime, but I started this. I've been involved in baseball. Matter of fact, I started playing with JD when I was in 3rd grade. I've been here a long time. And when I got out of the military and moved back, I started coaching my son's team. So since 2012, I've been doing this every year. And I want to see it be successful in Durant. Some of you may know that I tried to start a new league this last year. It didn't work, and I've got plans. I'm not quitting. I've got plans to continue to try to improve the situation of the league. But I had a parent ask me the other day, they were at my tournament in Denison, and they asked me, what do we have to do to change youth sports in Durant? And I said, we have to change the perception, the black eye that we have, the little things, some of the leagues, the leadership in the leagues could change the way they're doing things. After talking with Caleb yesterday, I didn't think about this. It makes all the sense in the world, but him being understaffed has a huge impact. Every restaurant, it seems like everybody has, help wanted signs. So I know that, the city's not immune from that also, but Durant is too big of a town to not be more successful with youth sports, and I want to stay home and do more here. I definitely think we need to press for some of those things that were mentioned in the 5-year plan and the approach going forward. And I'm more than willing to help from my standpoint. We've had some, I'll say off the record, preliminary conversations. I'm willing to help. When I was on the board with the Durant Baseball League, after everything that happened with our finances, I come up with a plan, using my experience as a facilities maintenance person at Michelin and dealing with budgets and doing some of those things. I came up with a plan where the board could actually donate some money to fix that Billy Miller field that was mentioned earlier. And everything went smoothly until all of a sudden the other board members said no. I don't know why. And I've since called Caleb and I said, man, I'll through my tournaments and my leagues or whatever, I'll donate half the money if the city can match. I'm prepared to do some of those things if it's gonna make the difference. Because I know that if we can improve our facilities, if I'm running a league and can use some of that money to improve those facilities, it's going to help me improve the turnout in my tournaments. So I have a long-term vision, and I'm working with a lot of municipalities in the area, but, I mean, Durant's home, and I think we need to be more successful here. And, you know, there's a lot of good things that are happening, and, you know, money's always the issue. I get that. But, you know, I'm here to help in any way possible. I wanna see us be more competitive from that standpoint, because we're just not there right now.
I mean, I think you know, my kid, we don't play softball, but we play soccer.
Mhm.
So, and we've played some, you know, t-ball, softball. So I think I understand, I share your frustration a little bit, with what you're saying. And I think that's something that in the past they've talked about, you know, improving, and hopefully it seems like we've, I don't know, kind of fallen behind a little bit with these, but I mean, I think definitely, you know, that's something, I feel like that's a chronic discussion with tournaments. I feel like since we've been doing this, and we don't have so much, you know, the Durant facilities folks also probably, they're involved with this as well. You know, you know, I think this has been an ongoing discussion. We've had different people come through here, you know, with different plans, and it doesn't seem like we've ever really, now, obviously, COVID's kind of made things worse, but obviously, if they're going to Toca, I agree with you. It seems ridiculous that we can't get them to come here. So, and I agree, the facility down in Denison is phenomenal, but I mean, it's,
But they're far more expensive than anyone else too, and I had that discussion.
well, yeah, I mean, but we played, because we didn't have enough girls for our
Right.
soccer team to play a league here. Even though we're still Durant, we played down with the Texoma Soccer Association last season, last 2 seasons, and the facility is phenomenal down there. But like you said, expensive. But
And if we can make
we don't even need
improvements to ours,
something that fancy. We just
Right.
need something that's a little bit.
if we can
more-
make improvements to ours
Right.
and be more affordable, then you're gonna pull some of those teams. Absolutely.
I have a question for you. When you compare, I guess, our costs to run an event here versus a Toca, you say to Toca, there's just a huge more pull, more teams going to a Toca than coming to Durant. Would you say that cost is part of that? Obviously, facilities you mentioned was a huge one, but is there a major cost difference between a Toca and Durant?
So Toca is probably the most affordable place for me to host, and I think that's because they understand where they are geographically. I pay $400 a day for 4 fields, and I'll put outside of the damage they got from the freeze this year, I'll put that facility against any facility between Dallas and Oklahoma City. It's phenomenal, but it's in a Toca, and they understand that.
Could you, what is a Toca, so what amenities does a Toca field have?
It's really just the basics. They've got a couple soccer fields there that they use. That doesn't really affect me because I'm not running soccer, but they've got 4 fields. They're able to set up pretty much baseball or softball on all but one of them. It's a high school baseball field, so we use it for t-ball and for 13 and above. You know, concession restrooms, the condition of the restrooms is better than ours. One of the things that I've noticed, and to be fair, I've only hosted a handful of tournaments in Durant over the past couple of years, but I noticed in Denison this last weekend, and I've noticed repeatedly in Toca, that they have that weekend help that Caleb mentioned that's in there continually cleaning the restroom. I took a break in Denison this last weekend, and there's a guy coming in there with his rubber gloves, and he starts wiping everything, and he's in and out real quick, but it makes all the difference in the world. Their lighting is phenomenal. There's not a dark spot on any of the fields. Parking it's easy to get in and out, and you know, it's access to the park is not much different than our complex. You know, it's right off of the highway right there. It's easy to get to. But to me, it's the level of care that Curtis puts in to his facility, and it's taken years to get it to that point. But you've got to have the manning to take. You know, he's got 4 fields. You've got 8 plus a football field plus soccer fields. I mean, the manning. It's got to be proportional, and I don't know if we're there. You know, that's above me. But if we can do it in a Toca, we should be able to do it here.
How about the bleachers? Are they covered? Do they have?
They are covered.
Okay.
Yep. And that is the biggest reason when I started doing this. I was doing a Toca and Durant together, and I joke with people, but I tell them, I was like, if you can keep the parents in the shade, they'll keep their attitudes kind of calm, because we all know how that, you get out there hot and you're financially invested and you're not sitting in the sun all day, you're going to be a little more irritable. And so I joke with people at a Toca that, sitting in the shade keeps everything civil, but,
Now, where's that located at in Toca? Is it across from the school?
it's going, when you kind of leave, I forget what, I forget if it's 69, it's the highway between Atoka and Colgate. Yeah, well, yes, yeah, if you come on, right there, if you hit the light right there at McDonald's and take that left.
Okay.
And then
Now
go
we're
back
talking.
right, so it's across
And
the street from the school?
Yeah, you cross in front of the school, and then it's that highway right there, right next to the airport.
Oh, okay.
I did just want to mention, so the first project that, we have capital improvement money still this year that we haven't used, that was here before I got here, so the budget was left over. And that money was gonna go towards the shade covers. But due to COVID, the price of those shade covers, I got the initial estimates back in, I think like November, they were 62,000, I think, or 66,000 for the fields, and then like shipping and handling was like 70. So the total was like 70. The price of those now is like $126,000, which is, we had $66,000 available in that capital improvement money. We don't have $126,000. So those have been, we're kind of looking at other ways to spend that money right now. But it's just the cost of COVID and materials and all that, so.
Could we do piecemeal and do a portion? Do maybe 2 fields instead of,
Yeah, we looked at doing that, so
Caleb?
the fields that get the most.
Caleb, if I could get you the mic over there. If you're at home and watching a live stream, you can't hear people very
Oh, okay.
well when they're away from the mic.
Yeah, what was your question?
could you piecemeal it and just do a portion this year to at least get started?
Yeah, we looked at doing that. We'd have to get a new proposal. And then, like, as mentioned, we start a new budget pretty soon, so that money is, we have to use that money pretty soon, so, we don't wanna lose that money.
Bathrooms.
Yeah, we need to fix something, you know, before we lose that money, so.
You're fine. And I will say, one of the mental notes I took earlier when we were talking about the turf, and JD brought up doing the softball fields. The great thing about turf is it doesn't matter what color it is when it's laid down. That's a softball field, that's a baseball field, it's whatever you want. And we do that in Denison, you know, it's one of them's painted like a baseball field and one of them's painted like a softball field. So even though we may do, you know, one portion of the complex or the other, it's gonna benefit everyone, baseball or softball. So, you know, from that standpoint, I think anything we can do to be more flexible would greatly improve the condition in Durant. You know, this last weekend I was in Durant. I got pictures. If you look on my Facebook, kids are playing and pouring down rain. There's no thunder. There's no lightning. I'm sitting here questioning whether we need to delay, and the kids are out there warming up, just soaked through, having a blast. And the call was made to cancel, I think, prematurely. And then, of course, once you make that call, the rain stops. But you know, we had 34 teams out there. Everybody knew that weather was an issue. Bleachers were covered, so the parents were dry while the kids were having fun. So I want to see some of those things come to Durant, and I know everything's time and money. I get it, but if there's ways to go down that road, I think we need to look at it, or we're going to continue to lose out. There's other areas around here. You know, I talked a little bit about Toca. Toca wants to turf their fields. They've got the greatest grass fields around here, and they're already looking to turf because of the rain and what it costs you when you have an event you got to cancel.
I have a question. Where's the Toca getting the money to do these things?
I don't know how they're financing their stuff. I know that I do know some of their banks donate, and there's some other stuff going on there, but I haven't spoken with them about how they're funding any of it.
Well, because that's a good question, right?
I assume that somewhere there's a punch list that you've turned in to somebody of these things that, from your perspective, that need to be done, at least the
So
top-
I've had
the top
conversations
10
with
or
these
what.
guys, and just speaking plainly, like, I'm not real familiar with what the process is. You know, I was kind of vocal when I was on the local board for the baseball league, and I kind of have some things going. You know, I've mentioned some things to these guys that we can do, and what we need to do to, you know, improve our facility when I compare it against some of the others. But this is the first time I've ever been in an environment like this. You know, I don't know. I'll use the term the politics behind it all. I know they're there, just, you know, but. You
I
know,
don't either, for that matter.
I'm kind of inching my way into this because, you know, there's a need, and ultimately, you know, I do this. I tell people the difference in the league that I offered and me running my tournaments and some of the other stuff locally is I'm not a not-for-profit. You know, I'm making a little bit of a profit on it, but that's not why I do it. As long as I stay in the black and I'm not paying to put on events, I'm happy. Matter of fact, my favorite event I put on last year, I lost a lot of money. My wife wasn't happy. but it's pretty cool when you get to stop a baseball tournament, have a break between games, see a professional fireworks show that Brady Stockpile comes out there and puts on, and then go back to playing baseball. I've never felt more like I was part of the movie The Sandlot in my life. It was awesome. So that's not the reason I do it. Our kids deserve better than what they have right now, and that's the frustrating thing for me is, you know, I was a board member for 2 years and I couldn't make it better. And so I'm trying to go down other avenues, and you know, this is my entry into, you know, formally getting with the city and with you guys. And I mean, I'm gonna have more conversations with Caleb and JD and the city manager and whoever I need to talk to, so I can learn what I need to do to go down a formal path to make things better.
Thank you for starting.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brad? I will probably talk to make the same presentation when the Durant Facilities Authority has their meeting. I think they probably should hear it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants my time or wants my opinion, I'm available. So.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot. I didn't realize you were
No, no, it's
presenting
fine.
back there,
It's
so.
fine. I should've spoke up.
All right, now, anybody else have any new business?
Bradley Dollar.
All right, now can I move to adjourn? All right, move to adjourn.
A second.
Let's take the roll. I guess it's on the computer.
This is not working, I think it's because it's abstaining from motion to adjourn.
All right, we learned a lot today. That's good. All right, adjourn. All right, that was productive.